Hey guys, so this video is going to be very different from my other ones because it's just, I'm doing the entire fic in one video because it's really short and I've never read it before, which I never do. It's like against my rule because I always read the fic before I read it for y'all, but I just got home for the first time in 3 months because I have Thanksgiving break and I'm in college. So I have the time and I have the space, like I don't have a roommate, so I just want to get it out of the way and do something and not waste time reading it or anything because I never have a chance to do this, so fuck it, we ball. Also, I left my mic at college, so sorry if the audio is terrible. Anyways, let's just get into it. Katsuki grunted as his alarm went off, his hand fumbling blindly around his nightstand until his grip finally found his phone. The light from the screen case caused him to squint as he turned off the blaring sound and quickly pulled up his to-do list for the day. He worked his way through his morning routine and a quick at-home workout before showering and getting ready for the day. The crisp morning air nipped at his skin, a sign that the seasons were shifting and the weather was cooling down. He was secretly pleased by the first signs of fall, having enjoyed the season ever since he was a child. Something about the leaves shifting from green to burnt orange made his soul ache in a way he couldn't quite find the words to explain. He took a moment to pick a well-preserved leaf off the ground, carefully putting it into his pocket and running his fingers over the smooth surface as he continued on his journey. He decided to step into the coffee shop on campus for a quick espresso before he headed to the library for the day, the smell of pastries and various caffeinated drinks striking him as he walked through the doorway. Katsuki had always tried to enjoy the little things in life, whether it was finding a sweater in his favorite shade of green or treating himself to a coffee before studying. It felt like a natural part of him, something ingrained within him ever since he came into the world. There was a table by the door that he decided to settle into for a while, choosing to finish his drink and people watch before he was faced with various laboratory reports for the next few hours. He saw a few familiar faces, such as the brunette girl with large brown eyes that always seemed to be drinking some type of sweet concoction. Katsuki stifled a laugh when she got a bit of whipped cream on her nose, but her pink-haired friend helped wipe it off before anyone else could notice. After 20 minutes, he had finished his double shot and decided that he had got his fill of watching the people around him, regrettably deciding that it was time to stop procrastinating and actually start studying. He grabbed his bag and rose from his seat and turned to leave when someone slammed into him from behind. "Oh, I am so sorry, oh my gosh," a voice yelled behind him. Katsuki was a bit annoyed as he turned around to face his assailant, but all the anger left his body when he turned to find a green-haired man looking up with him with concern. His eyes followed the constellation of freckles scattered across rosy pink cheeks, eventually rising to meet sparkling emerald orbs that were looking up at him with concern. Words completely escaped him as his gaze roamed over the stranger, taking in every small detail. They both seemed to freeze for a few moments, staring at each other as the universe seemed to crash around them. Katsuki's chest began to tighten, and he felt on the verge of an inexplicable panic attack. Tears began to slowly pour down the freckled man's cheeks, and Katsuki felt his own eyes begin to water without explanation. Do I know you?" Katsuki asked as his voice cracked, searching the man's face for any sign of recognition or familiarity. "No, I don't think so." The voice was softer now, and it took everything in him not to pull the smaller man into a crushing hug. "Why are we crying?" Katsuki whispered while shaking his head, growing more confused by the second as his palms began to sweat. It felt as though the world around them was breaking down and reforming, the pieces coming together and locking into places as though they had always meant to be there. Tears continued to stream down Katsuki's face as he tried to regain control over his emotions. He gave into the urge to reach out, extending his hand and interlocking his fingers with the man in front of him. The green-eyed man hesitated for a moment, a very confused expression crossing his face, before determination filled his eyes. "I'm sorry. I don't know what for, but it feels like I have to say it," the man said, his voice desperate and broken in a way that made Katsuki's heart ache. "It's okay, nerd." He wasn't sure where the nickname came from, but it felt right. The man, whose name he still did not know, breathed out a sigh of relief as his shoulders relaxed. It was as though he had finally let go of some unnamed burden that he had been holding back. They stood there holding hands, taking in the sight of each other for what felt like hours. The green-haired man was the first to break the silence. "I have to get to class." His eyes were filled with regret as he gently pulled his hand out of Katsuki's grip. "Give me your number," Katsuki said abruptly, cringing at his out-of-character behavior. What was it about this man? He dug in his pocket and pulled out his phone, relaxing a bit when he saw the green-eyed stranger creating a new contact. Desperation filled him, as though he couldn't bear the idea of losing him again. "I'm Izuku, by the way." Izuku looked up at him with a bemused expression, the tear tracks drying on his round cheeks. "I'm Katsuki." He felt the urge to reach out and grab Izuku's hand again, but he didn't want to stop him from getting to class on time. They parted ways, promising to meet the next day to try to figure out what was going on. Katsuki felt like a piece of him was missing in Izuku's absence, his heart telling him he had found something precious, something he had lost before. He spent the day studying and texting the mysterious stranger before heading to bed, his mind buzzing with forgotten memories. "Kachan, you're amazing!" "Useless fucking nerd, get out of my way." A constellation of freckles that he had memorized, a smile that made his entire being tremble when it was directed his way. "Kachan, that's mean. Are you looking down on me, asshole? To me, you were an amazing, inspiring person who was even closer to me than All Might. If you think you'll have a quirk in your next life, go take a swan dive off the roof." Katsuki woke with tears streaming out of his face, muffled sobs escaping into the cold darkness of the night as a sick feeling filled his stomach. In an apartment building on the other side of campus, Izuku dreamt of blonde spikes saturated with blood of a battle he won, but at a great cost. The universe pushed on, continuing its mission to bring the two destined souls together once more, but the universe never forged an easy path for those it assigned destinies to. Katsuki's throat filled with bile as he sat at the library, his legs shaking as the seconds ticked away on his watch. His mind flashed with images from his dreams, memories he was forced to unbury as he slept. Would Izuku, he corrected himself, even show up? Did the other man dream of the years of torment he had been put through? Footsteps interrupted his anxiety-filled thoughts, and he was surprised to find the freckled man staring down at him with warm smile and tear-filled eyes. "Kachan." The word was said with so much relief, like a prayer had been answered after years of begging the gods. Hearing the name filled Katsuki's chest with a mixture of warmth and nausea, his guilt eating away at him as he let Izuku tentatively reach out to touch his cheek. They stayed there for a few moments, taking in the reality of what they had now uncovered. Past lives weren't supposed to be real, especially when it involved superpowers and giant battles with villains. He normally would have written it off as his imagination running rampant, but something deep down inside of him knew it was all true. In another life, he dreamt of being a hero, and he had tormented the man in front of him for daring to share the same dream. He didn't realize he was crying until Izuku began wiping his eyes gently with the pads of his fingers. Katsuki leaned into the touch, his body craving the touch even though his mind scolded him for it. He didn't deserve any kindness from the person he had hurt in so many ways. His hand slowly rose up to grip Izuku's wrists, softly pulling them away from his cheeks. "You should be punching me in the face right now." He let out a wet, humorless laugh. Concerned green eyes scanned his face. Izuku's careful gaze made it feel like he was under the lens of a microscope. A sudden look of understanding crossed his face, and Katsuki briefly wondered how he could have ever hated having those sparkling emerald eyes on him. The man pulled his wrists out of his grip, kneeling until he was eye to eye with him. "Kachan, I don't think you have remembered everything yet." Izuku reached out to touch him again, but his hand paused a few centimeters away from Katsuki's face before dropping it. A dozen thoughts crossed his mind, and he had to fight off the urge to bury his face into Izuku's chest and sob. He didn't deserve to seek comfort from the man in front of him. He stood slowly, trying his best not to startle Izuku as he rose from the chair and picked up his bag. This had been a mistake. He should have left him alone and let him live his life in peace. Katsuki hoped Izuku had never been tormented in this life, even if it was a naive wish. He turned, readying himself to walk out the door, and to be content with only dreaming of the freckled man behind him. A hand shot out and gripped his shoulder before he could take his first step. "Kachan, where are you going?" The desperation in Izuku's voice broke his heart, but he'd rather break it now than get his hopes up that Katsuki was a better person than he had been in his past life. Without turning, he said his final declaration, a truth that would weigh on him for the rest of his life, along with the regrets from his past one. "I'm no good for you, Izuku." Sobs echoing in the air in harmony, crossing the distance between two destined hearts. Regrets and confusion plaguing both of their minds as the universe opened its chest of secrets once more. Izuku pleaded with whatever forces were at play, begging them to show his precious Kachan the full picture of their past together. His chest clenched as he recalled the pained expression in the blonde's eyes, the only proof he needed to realize the cruel joke fate was playing on them. While he was able to recall their entire past life, from a childhood of playing make-believe to the pristine halls of UA, Katsuki was plagued with dreams of their worst moments. Had they lost enough time? Hadn't they sacrificed enough? Didn't Katsuki know that Izuku had already forgiven him, long before he even knew there was anything to forgive him for? He fell to his knees as he remembered the feeling of Katsuki's lifeless body in his arms. His throat burned as his body recalled the screech that had erupted from him as he felt blood that was not his own soak through his clothes. He was certain he could convince Katsuki that he was forgiven, but will the other man ever be able to forgive Izuku for not getting there in time? Katsuki's fingers itched to text Izuku, but he stopped himself each time. It had been 2 days since their meeting in the library, and his mind screamed at him to find the green-eyed man and never let him go. How could he ask something like that of Izuku, the person he had tormented so terribly in their past life? An image of the two of them opening up packets and showing off their new All Might cards flashed through his mind. He cringed as he remembered the snippets of his dream, like the fall that resulted in him slapping Izuku's hand away, the smell of burnt caramel, a notebook flying through a window, words that filled his mouth with a sour taste. The last images were a bit of a blur, but he remembered getting into UA only to find out Deku was there as well. He remembered his rage, such a misplaced emotion, yet one he felt so strongly at the time. The last thing his dreams had shown him was Deku pinned to the ground underneath them, both of them covered in dirt and bruises. His childhood friend didn't look scared, though. Those shimmering green eyes were filled with an intense determination that made Katsuki's heart clench in admiration. How could Deku even look at him? It had become hard for him to even look in the mirror, even though he wasn't technically the Katsuki that had caused the harm. His phone went off, and he cursed his traitorous heart as it fed him the fantasy of Deku texting him and asking to meet. He was only mildly disappointed when he saw it was a daily reminder to start getting ready for bed. Sleep had been fleeting in the past 2 nights, resulting in flashbacks becoming non-existent. He wondered if he would dream tonight, though a small part of him wished he wouldn't. Remembering his past life, he had proven far too painful so far. Green lightning flashing through the air as Izuku flies overhead with a triumphant smile on his face. Learning Deku's secret, helping him train his quirk so that he could end up following the deadly legacy of the past, so he wouldn't end up following the deadly legacy of the past users. Working together to reach their dream, a quiet camaraderie hidden beneath their quips and avoidance. His body moving on his own, mind flashing with images of their past as he was speared, accepting his own death if it meant Izuku could continue living. Desperately searching the hospital, being pulled away before he could bury his head in Deku's chest, and finally apologizing for everything he had ever done to the green-haired boy. Ripping up a letter with tears filling his eyes, cursing Izuku's hero complex, missing those green eyes, the ones that had always followed him. Rivulets of rain dripping down his back as he swallowed his pride, pouring his heart out in front of their friends as he begged Izuku to come with them. Holding hands as they lay next to each other, refusing to be more than a few feet away as their quiet whispers filled Katsuki's dorm room. Accepting his death, yet again, knowing that this time he would not be coming back. His hand in the dirt, reaching out and imagining Izuku's fingers clasping his as consciousness escaped him. Katsuki sat upright, his chest heaving as tears once again streamed down his face. He paced around his room as the overwhelming reality of his dreams began to weigh down on him. Missing puzzle pieces began fitting together as he slowed, realization hitting him like a ton of bricks. Izuku knew. He knew their full history at the library. The desperation in his voice, the pleading in his eyes, it all made sense now. Katsuki had pushed him away again, a coping mechanism that seemed to translate over from his past life. He searched through his sheets for his phone, anxiety overtaking him as he dialed Izuku's number and brought the device to his ear. It rang and rang, eventually going to voicemail as he let out an annoyed curse. The nerd was probably sleeping, but he wasn't able to wait any longer. They had waited long enough. It was time for them to lay everything out on the table. He pulled on a pair of boots and stuffed his arms into a light jacket before running out of his apartment. There was a light rain falling over the city, but it wouldn't stop him from reaching Izuku. Something in his heart seemed to guide him, and he was too exhausted to question his easy acceptance of the fact. He was done trying to question the universe and the path it had set for him. He was in the middle of the engineering courtyard when he saw a figure walking on the opposite end. Katsuki ignored the other person, ready to pass by without incident and continue his way to Izuku. That was until he saw the matted curls clinging to his forehead, his throat constricting when he realized who was walking 10 feet in front of him. He didn't hesitate, immediately running up to Izuku and going over his apology in his head. Startled green eyes darted up, and a frightened yelp left the other man's throat as he stumbled to the ground. Dread filled Katsuki's stomach as he scolded himself for being so careless. Izuku seemed too shocked to pick himself back up, his wide eyes staring at Katsuki like he was a ghost. "I was looking for you." Izuku's voice came out as a whisper, but the words seemed like a chorus in Katsuki's ears. He reached out his hand, his heart pounding in his chest as memories of rain and apologies filled his mind. "I'm sorry I made you wait, Deku." Katsuki felt like he had so many things to apologize for, but that could wait for later. "You have nothing to apologize for, Kachan." Izuku smiled as he reached up and took Katsuki's hand, pulling himself up easily as the rain continued to fall. They embraced, the world around them seeming to disappear as their hearts beat in tandem. They returned to Katsuki's apartment to dry off and decompress, the blonde taking quite joy in seeing Izuku in his clothes. As he held the freckled man in his arms, he allowed himself to have a moment to think of the second chance they had been given. They were inevitable, two souls intertwined through a multitude of timelines and experiences. Katsuki knew they would always find each other, whether it took them a few years or decades in the next life. He would cherish every lifetime he would get with his Deku.